Hi, my name is Jerry Lorenz. I work for National Audubon Society. I've been studying the ecology of Florida Bay for the past 25 years. I'm just going to jump right into this. This shows you how water historically came from, we've been through this, I'm going to go through it very quickly, from the Kissimmee chain of lakes to Lake Okeechobee and then finally south into the Everglades and into Florida Bay. This is where it goes now, where it goes mostly to the east and west and not so much gets into the Everglades and down to Florida Bay. This is a little more detailed and a little more of a cartoon. Basically, as the water came across Tamiami Trail historically, Tamiami Trail wasn't there, it would back up behind this ridge in a thing called the Rocky Glades, which is a slight rise. It would spill over the Rocky Glades into what we call the headwaters basin of Taylor Slough, and then out through these gaps in the Everglades Key and come south into this part of Florida Bay. What has happened now is that we put in all these canals, drained a lot of the Everglades, put in the green dots represent structures or pumps, and we've converted a lot of that headwaters basin into agricultural and urban lands. This is, that happened in the early 1980s. This was the canal system that was built in the 60s in the background here. This is what it expanded to in the 1980s, and that is a pump, the 331 pump structure. It can move 1,250 cubic feet of water per second. So very powerful water. And so what this did is allowed us to move the water away from the Everglades, impound it, send it south much more quickly than historically. This is from a colleague's work where he used paleoecological models, and he estimated that conservatively the amount of water that is currently coming through Taylor Slough to Florida Bay is 4 times less than it was historically. So historically, again, what would happen is the green arrows, the water would flow through the slough and kind of be retained in this northeastern part of Florida Bay and this part of central Florida Bay, where the fresh water would reside for a good amount of time. Now a lot of the water is pulled out of the slough or pumped down the canal system and comes out over here near US 1 and is basically lost to that central part of the bay, ending up in that high concentrations of salinity that we were talking about. These green lines represent the area of mangrove dominance in northeastern Florida Bay. This is that canal, this is US 1 coming into the Keys. And these are data points there were surveys that were done in 1948, 1967, 77, and 94. So the mangroves are moving inland, and they're moving inland much quicker than can be explained by sea level rise. What's happening is we've turned off the flow of water, which is allowing saltier water to come up into that area. So I published this paper last year, just a review of the hydrology and salinity on vertebrate fauna and their habitats in northeastern Florida Bay. And this slide will be really clear. What this is actually, this is from that publication. And in this column is listed groups of species or species that have been scientifically documented to have been in decline in that northeastern part of Florida Bay. And these include a couple of reptiles, the American crocodile and the diamondback terrapin, marine mammals, both dolphin use and manatee use in that part of the bay has declined. We've seen declines in the nesting of 5 species of bird, great white heron, osprey, brown pelican, bald eagle, and the roseate spoonbill, which I will get to in just a minute. We've also seen declines in the fish that occur in these areas, especially the prey-based fish, the things that everything else eaten have declined. And along with that, the game fish. So I put up a snook and a redfish. There have been declines in sea trout and several other species as well. So this is the roseate spoonbill. This is basically the animal that is central to my studies. And what I've demonstrated is that these are indicator species. This is an indicator species for the rest of Florida Bay. So how the spoonbill goes, that's how the rest of it goes. As an example, well, this slide just shows that this is the history of spoonbills nesting in Florida Bay. And you can see in about the early 1980s when those canals came on board is when it started plummeting, and now we're down to very low numbers throughout Florida Bay and hardly any in that northeastern part of Florida Bay. So this is a bellwether of what's going on out there. And the reason I say that is because there's one of my little pink buddies in the background. There's a friend holding up a snook. And the snook was caught in the exact same place where the spoonbills were feeding. And if you look into that snook's mouth, it's in the shadows here, but the snook has coughed up its lunch. And this is what it's been eating. And that's exactly the diet of roseate spoonbills. So they're eating at the same place on the same things. And so that's why I frequently refer to this as a pink snook. So a little bit of history again. This is from a Miami Herald in August 1992, and it's a quote from Jay Zeman, who was a scientist working on seagrass problems at the time, and it just says, "Florida Bay is falling apart like a rotting piece of cloth." And it truly was. Jay Zeman and his colleagues documented this, is that all the crosshatch areas in Florida Bay are places that were denuded of seagrass. Basically, seagrass just died and decomposed. And this caused some major problems. We ended up with low dissolved oxygen. So from another article about that time, we had these massive fish kills in the western part of Florida Bay. This is from that same article, and it just shows you the trouble spots. We have out here in the western part of Florida Bay what fishermen call this dead zone. There just wasn't anything out there. We have mangrove die-off along the southern coast. We have these huge algal blooms that were taking place. And we had this hot water. Florida Bay was very salty, but it was also much hotter than the ocean side. But since it was so salty, that hot water was heavier. And so it would flow out through the gaps in the keys and literally float down, bringing hot water down on the reef itself. This is an algal bloom from 2007. This is the spatial extent of that bloom on August 18th. And you can see that it is extended out to the reef tract. And in that algal bloom, what we saw is this was a picture taken prior to the bloom. I believe this was after, and this is the same spot. And that sponge just disappeared, okay? So the bloom basically suffocated it. We also saw declines in our invertebrates, particularly of interest, stone crabs, pink shrimp, and spiny lobster. This is that same time period. This is just a couple days after I showed you the extent of the bloom. This is Tennessee reef, and you can see this just looks like reef. But when you blow up this picture, you can see this green slime kind of spreading out over the reef. And of course, that has an impact on our reefs. This just shows the Carey's Fort in 1960 and 1989. It obviously wasn't caused by what I was describing, but it does illustrate the changes in the coral reefs that are going on. So this is, again, I explained that water is coming out the Caloosahatchee. Well, that has an impact as well. Some of that water will flow south, and we end up with, this is a satellite image, we had that black water event, which ended up with dark water here in the Keys. And some of that may have been stimulated by water that was coming out the west coast instead of going through the system. Now, it's not just about the ecosystem. This is about our economy. And it's about what we're here for, our recreational activities, fishing, birding, those sorts of things. But there is also this economic component. This is from the Everglades Foundation. Tom's organization did a report that shows that $1 invested in Everglades restoration results in $4 of stimulus for the economy. So it's a good investment. Just some examples of the economics per year. The annual user value of water-related activities is estimated at $660 million per year. We also have a $59 million shrimp fishery, a $22 million stone crab fishery, and a $40 million Caribbean spiny lobster, which are all affected by the flow of Everglades. So basically what we want to do is change it from this to this and get the water back flowing through and down into Florida Bay. And again, this is what we sell. This is how we make our living. We sell our water and our corals. So in conclusion, damage to the Keys marine ecosystem from a degraded Everglades, Florida Bay is the current state, not some future state, based on an increase to nutrient flow. This will continue unless restoration is accomplished. And the real damage potential for us here in the Keys is in not completing Everglades restoration. It will continue to degrade. And so with that, I will pass it on to Andrew.
9 minutes, 42 seconds.